Terror in France. A dozen dead in an attack on the office of a satirical newspaper. Life showdown. The law that could close most abortion clinics in Texas is argued in court. Persecuted Christians. A new report details the worst offenders and the source of persecution. And trip planning. We preview the Pope's trip to Sri Lanka and the Philippines and our exclusive coverage. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, January 7th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Paris is shaken tonight after France's deadliest terror attack in 2 decades. Security forces are hunting for 3 gunmen who stormed the offices of a satirical newspaper. 12 people were killed, 11 injured, 4 of them critically. Our Susanne LaFrankie is following that story from the White House tonight. Suzanne?
Brian, world leaders are calling the coordinated attack an appalling human tragedy. This afternoon from the Oval Office, the president called the deadly carnage cowardly and evil and said an attack on journalists simply underscores the degree to which terrorists fear freedom of speech. Horror on the streets of Paris. The target, Charlie Hebdo, a weekly newspaper in France that pokes fun at politicians, public figures, and religion. On Wednesday, as the staff gathered for their editorial meeting, 3 gunmen broke in and attacked.
France is shocked today, a shock of an attack.
At least 12 people are dead, journalists and police among the victims. The shooters escaped. French President François Hollande wasted no time calling the shooting a terrorist attack.
We need to find the actors of this terrorist act. They must be arrested and brought before judges and condemned as quickly as possible.
Around the world, leaders rushed to offer France their support. In London, British Prime Minister David Cameron was quick to condemn the shooting. Here in Washington, President Obama released a statement saying he, quote, strongly condemned the shooting and offered his administration's help.
Each and every American stands with you today, not just in horror or in anger or in outrage for this vicious act of violence, but we stand with you in solidarity.
But the perpetrators need to be found first. All 3 remain on the loose. The president called France one of America's strongest allies in dealing with terrorists. He called France's president this afternoon, and he promised his administration will stay vigilant and help hunt down and bring the perpetrators to justice. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie at the White House, thank you. Vigilance is the key lesson to take away from the tragedy in France today. This according to a European terrorism expert we talked with this afternoon.
Not to be complacent, that there are people out there who hate us for our beliefs, for our values, for the things we cherish, like freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion. These people hate this, and they are determined to try to end our beliefs.
Calvi says in the wake of this attack, a drastic change in French security strategy will be required. Pope Francis strongly condemns the terrorist attack. He calls it abominable. According to a Vatican spokesman, the Holy Father says, quote, life and human dignity must be guaranteed with decisiveness, and every instigation of hatred refuted and respect cultivated. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Pope Francis plans to speak mostly in English during his upcoming visits to Sri Lanka and the Philippines. The Vatican held a briefing for journalists today. We learned the Argentine Pope will deliver all 11 speeches and homilies during that trip in English. Francis tried out his English in South Korea last summer, and he was a hit, even cracking jokes in English. The Holy Father arrives in Sri Lanka January 13th for a 2-day visit, then on to the Philippines for 4 days. EWTN News Nightly will travel with the Pope. You can watch our special coverage of the second papal visit to Asia next week. A Vatican hall jam-packed today with pilgrims and tourists for the Pope's general audience. Pope Francis continued his teaching on the family, inspired by the Christmas image of Our Lady who presents her Son to the world.
Lei ci dà Gesù. Lei ci mostra Gesù.
The Pope saying Mary gives us Jesus. He thanked all mothers for their role in society and in the church. The Holy Father said their daily sacrifices are not always appreciated. He also pointed out that the church is a mother, our mother, and that no believer is an orphan. Well, the Vatican is releasing notes from the Holy Father's selection process for new cardinals. Spokesman Father Federico Lombardi says the nominations reflect the Church's universality. 14 different countries are represented, some like Myanmar that have never had a cardinal. Pope Francis holds a meeting or consistory to elevate the new cardinals next month. The House gets right to work on day 2 of the new congressional session here in Washington. House Speaker John Boehner is focusing on the economy. He says passage of the Keystone Pipeline bill and the 40-hour work week bill will keep Americans working.
Too many Americans are out of work. Too many are working harder just to keep pace in the face of rising costs. And frankly, we've got an awful lot of work to do.
President Obama has already promised to veto the Keystone Pipeline measure. Well, the White House says the president will also veto that 40-hour work week bill. The legislation redefines a full-time worker under Obamacare from 30 to 40 hours per week. The White House argues it would reduce the number of Americans with employer-based health insurance coverage. Also, they say it could create incentives for employers to shift employees to part-time status. The new Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, says President Obama's veto would obstruct what American voters want. The Kentucky Republican says he holds out hope of working with the president on major issues, using examples of strengthening Medicare, balancing the budget, and decreasing the national debt. But McConnell says President Obama is the only one who can lead Democrats to compromise. Federal appeals court judges are scrutinizing a law poised to close all but 8 of Texas's abortion clinics. It's a case some say could go all the way to the Supreme Court. Wyatt Goolsby reports tonight.
Brian, nationally, this is quickly becoming a closely watched case. Today, a 3-judge panel asked pointed questions to attorneys on both sides. The U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals is trying to figure out if the hotly contested abortion law in Texas is constitutional. The bill was passed by the Texas legislature in 2013. The law mandates stricter building codes for abortion clinics, upgrades like wider hallways and hospital-style equipment, which could cost millions. The question is whether that law poses too much of a burden on clinics. Emily Horn, a legislative assistant with Texas Right to Life, was in New Orleans today for the arguments.
They were asking a lot of questions of the state, just kind of honed in on some things that were, I guess, a little surprising, just given how many questions they were asking about each thing. They barely let anyone finish a sentence when they were presenting, and so it was just a very fast-paced trial from start to finish.
Horn and many pro-life advocates say raising the health requirements for abortion clinics will help ensure the safety of women and children.
Well, if you recall the Kermit Gosnell case in Pennsylvania a couple years ago, he was convicted of murder for a woman, a patient of his that actually died in his clinic, and she was not able to receive medical attention. It's just conditions like that that actually are specifically addressed in these building standards that are under trial right now.
But not everyone agrees. Groups that are fighting against the law say the Gosnell case was a rare exception. They also say there are broader negative effects from the law. Nearly 24 states have passed laws similar to the provision being debated in Texas. Many analysts believe the case will end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
It is so good to have Dr. Alveda King with us, Pastoral Associate for Priests for Life. This Texas law and others like it, Dr. King, are they effective in turning the tide on abortion in America?
This Texas law is effective as we continue to keep this before the public in the judiciary and the legal systems. It is very important. My work with Healing the Shockwaves of Abortion with Silent No More Awareness campaign, we fully support these kinds of efforts, and this work is very important.
Dr. Alveda King with Priests for Life, we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Brian.
Coming up, a critical find in the search for answers to the crash of AirAsia Flight 8501. And a new report reveals some shocking statistics about modern-day persecution of Christians. I pray every day for all who are suffering in Iraq. Please join me. This tweet sent out by Pope Francis in September includes the only image ever sent from his account. It depicts 2 persecuted Christian children in Iraq. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday evening, January 7th. I'm Brian Patrick, and modern-era Christian persecution is at an all-time high. A new report released today says 100 million Christians are persecuted worldwide. Jason Calvi has more.
Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on to Jesus, hold on to
Songs like this comfort Damaris Otson. The Islamic terrorists of Boko Haram stabbed her husband to death in 2010.
I had wanted to commit suicide, but I asked God to help me. Give me the grace to hold on to him.
Damaris lives in Nigeria. For the first time ever, that country's on the top 10 list of the World Watch List. The report ranks the 50 countries where it says Christians are persecuted the most. It's put out yearly by Open Doors, a group that provides aid to persecuted Christians. The group says more than 4,300 Christians were killed for their faith last year.
What the persecuted believers need most is hope. They need to know that there's not a power vacuum. Their voice is not, their cries are not heard in silence, but that people hear and they care.
North Korea has topped the list for 13 years. Number 2, Somalia. And third this year, Iraq.
The World Watch List makes it easy to see where Christians suffer the most extreme persecution. That's countries in red here. The orange is severe persecution, and green, including in Mexico and Colombia, is where Christians suffer moderate persecution.
It's getting harder and harder to ignore the fact that Christians are being absolutely eradicated from entire countries.
Damaris, now a widow, is pleading to God.
Our desire for the Boko Haram is that, Lord, you will touch their hearts so that they will know you.
Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Timothy Shah is joining us, an Associate Director of the Religious Freedom Project at Georgetown University's Berkeley Center. Let's take a look at those top 3 offending countries, Timothy. Number 3 on the list, Iraq, a parliamentary democracy. Radical Islam causing the Christian population to dwindle there to mere thousands. Were there any warning signs that the climate for religious freedom in Iraq was deteriorating?
Yes, ever since the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, religious freedom has actually been deteriorating because of the opening up of the country to radical forces. And we knew that Christians were under threat really from 2003 onward.
Let's turn to Somalia in the number 2 slot. This is a federal republic. Islam is the official religion. There's a very tiny Christian population, maybe a few hundred out of 11 million people. It makes you wonder if federal republic is a misnomer. Apparently there's a lack of government structure in Somalia. How does that contribute to the conditions that Christians face there?
The problem in Somalia is a lack of effective government. The federal government controls only a small portion of Somalia's territory, the capital, and a little bit more than that. In other parts of the country, the radical group Al-Shabaab is in control, and they are profoundly anti-Christian, opposed to any form of Islam that's not compatible with their radical views.
And again, number 1 on the list, more than a decade now, North Korea. We've heard a great deal about this country in the news lately. 300,000 Christians live there. This is an atheist state with a communist dictator. Now, it's hard for us as Americans to imagine the godlike worship that this political leader expects from his people. Can you describe the effect that that would have on the Christian population there?
The Christian population there is mercilessly persecuted. It is illegal even to be in possession of a Bible. It's illegal to have any religious activity that's independent of the government, independent of government control. People have been publicly shot by firing squads simply for possessing Bibles in North Korea, which creates a terrible atmosphere of fear for Christians in that country.
This all sounds very hopeless. What we heard them say is what they need is hope. What can we do?
We can pray, first of all, as the Holy Father has said. We can also get angry. More Christians in the West who are living mostly comfortable lives need to be angry, need to express their anger to their public servants. We need to talk about these problems in our churches and ask our religious leaders to stand up and protest and do more to put pressure on our government to do more to promote religious freedom abroad.
Well, thank you for that important reminder. Timothy Shah, Associate Director of Religious Freedom Project, Georgetown University's Berkeley Center. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
A suicide bomber has killed at least 33 people in Yemen. Dozens of others were wounded in this attack. Violence has been on the rise since Shiite rebel militias took control of the capital and other cities. No one at this point has claimed responsibility for the attack, but it is similar to assaults carried out by Yemen's local al-Qaeda branch. The U.S. considers al-Qaeda in Yemen the most dangerous in that terror network. Searchers have now found the tail of the missing Air Asia flight that crashed in the Java Sea about 11 days ago. This discovery is critical because the tail section could contain the jet's black box data recorders. Searchers have been scouring the waters off the coast of Indonesia since December 28th, when that plane crashed with 162 souls on board. Another body has now been found that brings the total of recovered victims to 40. Up next, a Homeland Security expert discusses how cyber warfare is challenging America and changing the world. And Eastern Orthodox Christians brave Moscow's harsh winter to celebrate their Christmas with traditional dance. On this 7th of January, we remember St. Raymond of Peñafort on his feast day. The patron of the arts, and the Vatican Museum's posted this painting of the Spanish saint on its Facebook page. It depicts him sailing on his cloak, escaping King James of Aragon. St. Raymond was the personal confessor and close advisor to Pope Gregory IX. Thank you for joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Paul Rosenzweig is a Homeland Security expert joining us by Skype from Costa Rica. Paul wrote Cyber Warfare, How Conflicts in Cyberspace Are Challenging America and Changing the World. Paul, the U.S. and other nations can prosecute cyber criminals domestically, but what about international cyber crime like the hack of Sony?
Well, unfortunately, it's very hard to prosecute crimes internationally. The United States has extradition treaties and a convention that it has signed with a bunch of other Western nations. Unfortunately, the places where most of the cyber criminals find haven, like North Korea or Russia or the Ukraine, haven't signed those treaties, and therefore people who act from those countries are pretty much immune to criminal prosecution.
Well, that certainly started a lot of people when Sony was hacked and had to react the way that it did. Do you think that that could prompt the U.S. Congress to act on cybersecurity legislation anytime soon?
Well, I certainly would hope so. Cybersecurity legislation has been hung up in Congress over concerns about privacy and concerns about government regulation. But I think that the path forward is towards some legislation that enables public-private partnerships between the government and the private sector like Sony before the attacks happen, rather than now after the attacks when we're just cleaning up the mess.
So this affects all of us. Target and Home Depot are hacked. So many of us have accounts there. What steps can be taken, do you think, with cyber law and policy to prevent future attacks like those?
Well, I think that a lot of the answer really lies outside of the cyber domain. Since we can't really find the attackers and can't extradite them, what we need to do is bring to the fore some of the other tools that we have, diplomacy, economic sanctions, financial sanctions, as well as law enforcement, and use those as a way of trying to affect behavior outside the United States. Just using the criminal law won't cut it, I think.
This mess really kind of sneaked up on us. Do you expect 2015 to be a year where some big steps are taken?
I expect 2015 to see an exponential increase in attacks and possibly the first type of response that we've ever had from the U.S. Congress, hopefully.
All right, his book is Cyber Warfare, How Conflicts in Cyberspace Are Challenging America and Changing the World. Paul Rosenzweig, thanks for joining us by Skype from Costa Rica tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Merry Christmas. Our Orthodox Christian brothers and sisters celebrate their Christmas today. Orthodox Christians in the Holy Land, Russia, and some other Eastern Orthodox churches follow the old Julian calendar. On that calendar, Christmas falls today, the 7th of January for us. In Moscow, the snow and cold just added to the celebration, which includes dancing to traditional folk music.
I think the celebration was especially fun for children. A bit of dancing felt really nice in this frosty weather. Very well done.
Catholics and Protestants, of course, adopted the Gregorian calendar, which celebrates Christmas on December 25th. And of course, we celebrate Christmas as a season, which of course is just now wrapping up. Well, until tomorrow, we encourage you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. You can download the app from EWTN. That's the best way to watch it on your smartphone or your tablet. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you so much for watching. And we leave you tonight with a few candid moments from today's general audience at the Vatican. Good night, and may God bless you.